Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. It's June 3rd, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Richard Hoehler. Is that the correct way to pronounce your last name, Richard?
Yes, it is.
Where are you calling in from?
New York City, Washington Heights, to be specific.
How cool is that? First question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being, I would say, is to be able to be completely themselves. I'm an actor and I teach acting, and that's what really is at the heart of everything. Is that anybody, if you can really own who you are, embrace all of that, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that is about. I think that's the greatest success that you could be in this life.
That was really good. But the first like four words you broke up, do you remember what those were?
That well, I said that the best thing, about what was the question. I tried to rephrase the question in the answer, but it was just
Yeah.
that
No, you.
the best thing is to be able to own yourself, to be
Oh,
yourself
to
completely.
own yourself. Yeah, to own yourself. Yeah,
That's it.
that's
Yeah,
what broke up. Yeah,
right.
you sussed it out well. To own
Yeah,
yourself. That is good. What's
yeah.
your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
I like to read. I like to be able to get information at my own pace and to be able to stop and think and absorb. I don't like it. I don't watch the news. I don't watch things that where it's set at a certain pace and you have to sort of take it as they give it to you. I like to be able to have some part in that myself in the receiving of it.
Did you become a reader, Richard, because your parents were doing it as an example? They told you, encouraged you to read, or on your own?
My mom was a big reader, so she modeled that. My father could not read. He really had very little education, so I had like both poles there. But I learned to love reading at a very young age, and I still find it, just every morning I spend at least a good hour, hour and a half just reading. I picked like four books that I have going, a fiction, a nonfiction, some kind of, from my field of study and something in the theater, and then some kind of spiritual reading. And that is how I get started on the day. I sort of like, that's how I get to own myself. And then I go out into the madness that we are facing every day. And it
Dude,
helps to have a little bit.
you're my
Yeah.
hero, man. I wish I could have that concentration, have four specific books, take an hour and a half. That's really good. So, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Um, I think for security, I think everybody is a little basically insecure or fearful, and I think people feel that the more information that they have, the more safe they'll be. I don't necessarily agree with that. Sometimes I think it's good to not know and to live in that not knowing and become comfortable in that because um, then you're not at somebody else's. I mean, you're not beholden to anybody else. You know what I mean? So I think that's why people gather so much information and why, like now, it's just sort of there just seem to be they're just people seem to be gobbling up information like crazy, and I kind of hold that to the side. I try to stay away from that deluge of information coming at me.
Yeah, we call it information overload. It's amazing what you said
Yeah.
because you could be the poster boy for our podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Most people don't pursue not knowing. I mean, not knowing is really hard, to
Yeah.
literally pursue. So that was beautiful. Do you just need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I missed the first part of that because the signal got
Is
wonky. What
Right.
you
Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
as everything, I think it's a bit of both. I think we do have we're a curious race, human race, and we are, but I think that the the way that things have been going because of technology and because of media, and that it has fed this little sort of humble, simple need, and it's become this voracious appetite. So I think it is nature and nurture, if that is not being too on the fence.
No, that's fine. Some of these early questions are either or, and it's totally fine to tackle them and pursue them any way you want. Do thoughts create emotions?
Yes, I do. They do, and I see. I keep coming from this sort of point of view of being an actor and being an acting teacher. You know what I mean? And that is at the heart of a lot of the work there. That we can think our way, into things sometimes, but the converse can be true as well. An emotion can create a thought. But I do believe I do believe that I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how. What I'm trying to say is when it's forced, it's very obvious, and the emotion is not as genuine. Uh, when people try to think their way into feeling, I think that if you have a thought and it does evoke some kind of feeling, then it's a genuine kind of feeling. But I think there's because and I'm still I'm sort of stuck in my field, which is I see a lot of actors and they try to make themselves feel something, and it's never genuine, it never reads, uh, and it's coming from a thought. So, but I'm not saying that thoughts don't create genuine emotions. They do, I
Really
think.
well put. We're going to get deeper into that. I appreciate this, Richard. We really get what we're after is we'll go into acting, but it's like, does the actor cry, shed the tear with the onion before the camera's rolling, or literally think of something that makes them shed a tear? So, that's that we'll get into that. But your observations, and again, I know it's both and it depends. Are humans more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
Well, I think thinking is what separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. Whereas I believe animals do feel. We have that in common. Um, Yet I feel that again it's a both, but I think that what human beings are capable of feeling, and I'm going to stick with the more positive end because we've got too much of the other end going on right now, is that the depth of feeling that we have is unique to the human race, and I think really, really is the most brilliant part about being a human being. But of course,
Yeah.
that's put to good use.
Dude, this is really what we're after. We're trying to go the deeper level. So just saying the depth of feeling, you're really right there. Fill in the blank, Richard. I don't know what I think until I
Think about it. I don't. Yeah, well, in connection to the last thing, I don't know what I think until I feel something about it. You know what I mean? Until
yeah.
I feel something in my gut, and then it's like, okay, I guess that's where I weigh in on this. You know.
See, McLuhan said, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion said, I don't know what I think until I write it. But I do get
Hmm.
that answer. I don't know what I think until I feel about it. Yeah,
Right.
that was good. Can humans think without language?
I don't know. You know what I mean?
That's
It's interesting. It's and I'm living in that I don't know place. I'm not afraid to go there.
yeah.
But people are always saying that you'll learn another language when you dream in that language or something. And it's like, okay, you know what I mean? But so I have no idea.
No, and see, that's the
You
beauty.
could
You're
tell.
not afraid. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Just because I'm asking questions doesn't mean you even have to answer them. And the fact that
Mhm.
you say, I don't know, sometimes people are scared. They're like, well, I have to say something. I said, no, you don't. You can say, I don't know. That's totally valid. So Chomsky says that language is not just words, it's culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
And I think we are at that very point right now, or have been for a while. I see. I will always go to my place, which is art. I'm an artist, and I've been an artist my whole life, and it's the way I express myself. And when language doesn't work anymore, you know what I mean? I go to my work, and sometimes I can create pieces that were there is no speaking, where it's the behavior, it's the actions, the casting of the play. There's all sorts of things that I can do to try to communicate something that cannot be expressed in words. Because I think certain subjects are just worn out now. We just can't even say anything more. You know,
Yeah. Really good. Two questions from Alan Turing, 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
is thinking a function of the soul? That's very deep. Who was that asked that question? Alan.
Alan Turing, the guy, he sort of helped invent AI, or he was that
Oh yeah,
they had
right.
that big movie on him a couple years ago. Turing, Alan Turing. Yeah, the Turing test. That's what he's known for.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say AI because yes, I mean computers can think, but they don't have souls. You know what I mean? And we have souls whether we like it or not. You know what I mean? Not necessarily that the thinking is not necessarily at all times connected to that soul at all. I think that they can run parallel, like wires that aren't just connected, but it's when the thinking does connect to the soul that I think that's when you've found a human being who's really enlightened and is really onto something.
Richard, you must have ESP, because the second Turing question is, can machines think?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
not in the sense can they think? Yes. Can they do algorithms? Yes. Can they take into consideration extenuating circumstances and special cases and a look on somebody's face? No.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Do you more pursue meaning or more pursue happiness?
Meaning. And I meaning sort of I find meaning in things, it makes me happy. You know what I mean? To pursue happiness just for the sake of happiness to me is kind of like getting drunk, and it's over the next day. Um, Meaning is much more important to me, and everything that I do, I try to find meaning, and sometimes it causes a lot of pain too. It doesn't create the happiness, but when I do find it, it's more than happiness. It's joy, and I think that's a much more significant feeling than happiness.
Really beautiful. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I mean, I think that we are. I mean, when we're born, I mean, we are conscious. Even as infants, we are conscious. Like it's pre-verbal, but so there is a consciousness there that when I believe that we have the option in our lives to either develop or diminish. So we do play a part in it, but I think it's given to us from the start. I think it's the raw materials.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of I would say being poetic, speed of thought. I don't know
That's good.
the science.
There's
You know what I mean?
there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you
Right.
got right.
Yeah.
Especially, I love you put the little being poetic. That's really good.
Right.
It's beautiful. Because people, we're using words, and like T.S. Eliot said, when I talk to you, I got to use words, but all words are metaphoric. So we're trying to think we know. So to onward to poetry, Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, you can if you expose the tools. So my question to you is, what new tool do you suggest, or what new tool do you gravitate towards? But just to put it into context more, you don't have to apply the cute quote I put before a question. It's you put it into the context you want, and you don't have to say new tool. I say, what new tool do you suggest? It can just be a tool. It's more or less, what tool do you gravitate towards? But you know, it can apply to dismantling the master's house.
Right. And when you say that the master's house, I mean, that's, I go all over the place with that expression. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially nowadays. Um, the man, you know what I mean? The system, what are we, is that who we're talking about? You know what I mean? The right. I'm finding one of the things, one of the hardest things for me to do, I think, I don't think I'm alone on this, but I mean, what I've been finding in my life is to be absolutely honest, completely honest, and I find that brings a house tumbling down like nothing else. Um, not, you know, sugarcoating it, not, just rephrasing it so that nobody gets their ass up, but um, really just honestly answering, like before when I said, I don't know, like when I'm teaching in the classroom, the student asks me a question and I've got all these eyes on me and I say, I don't know, but I'll try to find out. That was when I think I made a big step as a teacher, when I was not afraid to be completely honest with them and say, I don't know, you know? And I think I was teaching more by saying, I don't know, than making up some answer that, sounded good.
You know what Alice Walker said? Yes, mother, I can see you are flawed. You have not hidden it. That is your greatest gift to me.
Wow.
That's
Great.
heavy. That you probably taught the students more by saying, hey, I paid big bucks to go to school here, and you're supposed to know everything, Mr. Teacher. And by saying,
Right.
I don't know, that probably was the greatest lesson you taught them, Or I
Yeah.
mean, not the greatest, but it was an important
No, but I
one.
mean, but it's an important lesson that they learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, that that somebody who's in the know can say, "I don't know."
Yeah. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I worry about my son. Um, yeah, he's 24. He's out on the other side of the country, and you know, I worry about him, and I worry about the state of the world. And to be honest, I was just talking to a friend of mine before, and she called me up. She says, I'm just worried about the world. Like how many friends call you up and say that? And I says, I'm worried too. I'm really worried because I think it's really broken. I says, I do too. And of course, my son has to live in that world a lot longer than I will, and that that does keep me up a little bit before I fall off.
Yeah. Richard, what's the difference between worry and concern? Is there a difference,
Um,
actually?
I think there is a difference. I think concern is maybe a little healthier than worry. I think sometimes worry starts to take on one takes on too much responsibility for the problem. It makes it their own problem. I mean, I think that concern means I'm aware that there's a problem, there's a situation, maybe I can do something about. But I used to. This is going to sound kind of dysfunctional, but I used to have my way of thinking before I sort of got a little bit more grown up was what I used to say, that if I wasn't worried about something, I felt irresponsible. You know, and that's you know that's kind of messed up, because it's like, oh, like, what was I worrying about again? Almost I had to remember what it was I was worrying about. That kind of worry I don't think is healthy. But to be concerned about life and about things that are going on, I think is being aware, and that would be the word that I would use. I think awareness is like paramount.
I love that word. And I got to tell you, when my mom passed away, everybody thought she worried too much. So I got up in front of everybody at her service and I said, "There's a lot of people in this room that worried that Dolores worried too much." Because in essence, I think there is a fine line between worry and concern. I think you're worried about your son, you're concerned about your son, you're aware of your son. But it's like,
Right.
I love that. If I wasn't worried, I felt irresponsible. There's a beautiful honesty to that. That's really,
Yeah.
that's so. Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. So I mean artists, theater people, teachers,
Right.
painters, everything. So artists are broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So this basic question McLuhan probed, I ask you, why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
I think it's fear of the truth. It's fear of, as I said before, about being honest is the greatest accomplishment I think somebody could make as a human being. I think that art exposes the truth. And that's what's
Yeah,
at the heart of it. It's simple, it's direct, and some people just can't bear to look at it.
yeah. And Louis Buñuel said, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it." How do you address that idea?
Well, I think I heard somebody recently say, I think it was Anthony DeMello, said, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. It's once you think you know something, you're off the track. If you remain open to knowing, then you know something. So
Yeah.
it's you know it's kind of metaphysical, but
It's always but do you think artists have a moral obligation?
yes, I do. I do. I know a lot of artist friends who don't agree with me, but I personally feel that I have an obligation to show the truth. I have to push the envelope. I'm doing a show this summer where we're doing just touching on some subjects that are going to make people uncomfortable. And one of the actors even said to me, he says, "Well," I was kind of impressed. It's a young kid. It's like 19. He says, "Well, when I'm asked to do things like this that make me uncomfortable," he says, "the day that I stop feeling uncomfortable, then I'm going to get worried." And I was like, "Well, good for you. I'm looking forward to working with you," because he recognizes even at that age, you know what I mean, how important it is. So
Like, to be honest to your feelings and not deny or
yeah,
repress them. Yeah.
right. And he
I
knows he's
mean,
going to feel some things that are going to be unpleasant for him, dealing with racism and things like that. But he's willing to do that because he feels that obligation, as I feel that obligation to instruct or to teach or to show. You know what I mean? And that it's a responsibility I have. I mean, I feel like being an artist is a real gift, and I need to, pass this on.
yeah. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Old ideas, because I worry about even in myself. If I get stuck with this, doing things a certain way, I think like what's going on. I mean, new ideas don't frighten me so much because I'm curious, I'm interested, but old ideas I'm more suspect about.
Really beautiful, Richard. I appreciate this. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Uh, One of my first memories yeah, because I do an exercise in an acting class where we ask, when was the first moment that you remember being you? Like when you were aware of yourself as a being, as an entity. And I remember walking down the stairs of it was in first grade, walking down the stairs of the school with that metal grating on the side. In schools they have that metal grating so nobody falls.
Yeah.
And I was carrying a bag of cans, for they were having a food drive. And I had been so excited about that I was going to be able to bring these cans to the food drive and help the poor people on the other side of the world. And it was like the first time I felt like I was contributing, I was doing something, and I was just thrilled. And I'll never forget that day. So
Wow. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I have, in my family, I have the reputation of having kind of the best recollection of things long ago. And I value that. I'm grateful for that. Not for some of the unhappy things, you know what I mean? But I'm grateful that I remember a lot of my life. And so I think it is a blessing. Unfortunately, some of the memories are painful and upsetting, but I am willing, I take the good with the bad because I would rather that. I have some of my siblings that they have no recollection, that they just don't remember like whole blocks of time. And that just blows my mind. And I would rather, maybe they're blocking out bad things, as a protection, but I'm grateful that I've got all of it. You know what I mean? Because some of my fond memories of long ago are really wonderful, and they still, feed me to today.
Tell me someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact? Just briefly.
Um, Going back, my father's father, he had a way of, we would sit and watch, back in the day, watch Bonanza when it came on TV in color, first color TV on the block. And I would sit next to him watching that, and every once in a while he would just reach over and just pat me on the shoulder and then go back to watching. I tear up when I think of it now because it was wordless, but what he was saying was like, "You're here, come on, I got you." You know what I mean? And it was such a wonderful feeling, and I will always feel his hand on my shoulder. Um, he was, and then as far as outside of the family, I had a teacher, and I went to a Catholic school, and all the cliches and the nun, and they're all true, the beatings, the craziness. But I had a nun for a couple of months in my 8th grade year, who was a mensch, who was a human being, and she was the one when she recognized that I loved the theater and that's what I wanted to do. And she says, "Well, what do you want to do when you grow up, Richard?" And I says, "I want to be an actor." And she said, "Well, then that's what you're going to be." And she was the first person to give me permission to do what I wanted to do. And nobody in my family had ever given me that. And so for all the bad
Wow.
stories about nuns, she trumps the whole thing. She fixes it all. So
We have a lot of parallel. Basically, when I tear up in one of these 90-minute interviews, if it happens once, I know this is a pretty good one. I've like teared up 3 times already, Richard. No, that was amazing because this woman told me the other day, Tamara Rogoff, she's a dancer in New York. She said she got from her dad as a doctor, he would hold the patient's hand while he was diagnosing them. And it was just like,
yeah,
I mean, nowadays you might get in trouble, but I mean that
I
what you
know.
communicated with you didn't say you got this from your grandfather or that. You communicated that you got human touch. That
Yeah,
is an important thing, That was really immense. And I had the same thing with nuns. I had a couple nuns that were like huge in my life.
there
Um,
were some remarkable women. Yeah.
so you answered the next question. Again, you must have EP as what religion were you raised? The next question would be, do you pray?
Yes, I do. I'm not sure to whom, but I pray. And it's funny. I always say I went to a Catholic grammar school. I spent my whole high school years at the Jewish Community Center because that's where all the theater was going on. And then I went to a conservative Protestant college. So, like I said, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. I got all the flavors. And I do believe in or not believe. I don't want to say believe. I feel something, and I can't define it, and the less I define it, the more I feel it. I think feeling it is more important than defining it, and that's who I talk to once in a while when I'm going crazy, or when I'm not, when I'm feeling good sometimes too.
Beautiful. If God exists, what do you want God to say to you after you die?
You did good, kid. Yeah.
Fine. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Uh, I don't know. It's funny because people go on about, like, if you believe in the existence of a higher good being, then there must be a lower bad being. I don't know about evil incarnate and all that. But I do believe that I don't know if I believe that anyone is really evil. I believe that people are really frightened. And I think, someone said there's only two things: there's love and there's fear. And I'm going to try to move toward the love as much as I can. But fear has, in the name of fear, which we can call evil, has done some of the most heinous and horrific things we've ever been known. And I think it all comes from fear. So I don't know if I
Yeah.
believe in evil.
Pretty heavy, Richard, because mo a lot of people say that there's not everybody's capable of evil, but it's trauma or something in the back. You put it in fear, which is amazing because still saying trauma, everybody has forms of trauma. And then who's judging? Well, my trauma is worse than yours. And so then I'm rationaling my evilness or my bad deeds or whatever. So this follows it up, though. It's how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you, Richard, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you address Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I think I've read a lot of Alan Watts, and I like him very much. Yeah, I don't know if the word acknowledge is what I would agree with as much as react to. You know, then it becomes, then it's on. You know, um, so I think that just the way that's stated, I don't know if that's the right word, but and I was this is like kind of it's not a non sequitur, but it's kind of a little bit off the cuff. But like, there's a friend of mine who always had an expression that she loved. She says, "Well, as the Italians say, many enemies, much honor." you know and so if I could live, by that, it would be one thing if I didn't feel the hurt that comes from people who I perceive as my enemies. But if I could really think like, okay, a lot of people don't like me, I must have some kind of voice or some kind of presence, or they must feel like I'm somebody. If I could get behind that, okay. But I'm not quite there.
I like that. It has a flip to it. It's sort of like John Cage saying, it doesn't matter what the critics say, it's how thick your press kit is. So, you've been
this
in
friend of mine
theater.
would, this friend of mine used to run with John Cage back in the day. So it's so
Yeah.
funny that his name would come up right next.
And it is amazing because you could have a pile of bad reviews this thick, but man, you got written up in every paper. It's
That's right.
like
I would say any publicity is good publicity,
good publicity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Many enemies, much
Much
honor. I might
honor.
might add that. So this is up here finally. We're going to get into your career pursuits and all that. But first of all, James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He ran a cinema and he basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?
Mhm.
Years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, here, here. Um, is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah. No, I like hear, hear. That's pretty good. It
Right,
depends on how you spell the hears, though. Is it
right, exactly. Both ways.
A-R-E or A-G-A-R?
Right. No, I often think because I've done theater my whole life. Since I was 14, I put up my first play. So I have been, constantly recreating life in this make-believe world, in this make-believe space with lights and, everything is, and trying my damnedest to make it as real as possible and to draw the audience in and let them have an experience. I think because the nature of human beings, I think sometimes people they can have that experience more with all that artifice and all that stuff, maybe because we're struggling to get over that. Then sometimes we just take life too much for granted. I walk through the park and it's like, oh, isn't this nice? But I got this appointment at 3 o'clock and blah 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 blah. Whereas if the curtain goes up on this stunning set, you know what I mean, and I'm like, oh wow, that's beautiful. So
Yeah.
I think it's part of our nature that we kind of we're sometimes dull to our environment, and I think that's unfortunate, but I think there's ways to work on that also.
I think it's that word you brought up, awareness.
Yeah.
These things can heighten our awareness. So tell me, like, walk me through, when was the tipping point? I mean, you already said it in a way when the nun said to you, I want to be an actor, and you said you can be an actor. That was your tipping point. But what was it before that was the tipping point to get you to say that? I mean, you're going to movies, theater growing up. Like, walk us through that, the tipping point pre the nun.
Well, it was the first time I saw a play. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like that old cliche. I mean, I got bitten. You know what I mean? Like and I went to go see a play. It was an outdoor production, and there was a kid in the play, and the kid was really good. And the kid was like under the lights, and I was like, I was a kid, and I was watching this kid, but he was on stage, and I was like, I want to be that kid. You know what I mean? Like that kid. He's like he's living his life, and everybody's checking it out. You know what I mean? Like maybe I don't. There was just something, and because he wasn't being like a cliched kid, like the bratty kids you would see on TV shows and stuff. He was really good. And I thought, like, wow, that's really cool. He's really himself, even though there's all this stuff going on, and it just grabbed me, and I've been recreating that ever since.
But what age was that compared to the nun
I would
epiphany?
say that was maybe the nun was eighth grade. That might have been like fifth or sixth that I saw.
Wow.
Yeah,
So then just briefly walk us through it. Did you do high school plays, then go to college and study theater?
yeah.
Who were some of your, like, major teachers or inspirations through college, let's
Right.
say?
Well, I mean, high school, obviously, I did plays, and I started my own theater company in high school because, like, all the plays were cast with all the popular kids and all the jocks and all, everybody sort of like, like uh, took all the roles up. So as I've always been, I created a small theater company for the rest of us because we played supporting roles in the main plays, and then we got to play bigger roles in our own private shows and stuff like that. We toured around. In college, I had a lot more success. I worked constantly on stage. Um, I don't. When you say I had some very good teachers and people that but I really didn't understand what it was I was doing until I got out of college, until I came to New York and started to study professionally, not in an academic setting, but in a professional, setting. And Jack Garfine, Gene Frankel, people like that really, really taught me what I kind of already knew but didn't trust to do because I had been
What is that? What were those main things? Can you articulate?
to really, I mean, one thing that people always said about me when I was really young as an actor was they say, Richard, we don't know if you're acting or if you're just you. Like, we can't tell the difference, but it's good. And I was like, okay. But then when I got into doing a lot of college theater, like I was being forced into kind of roles where I had to do bigger things and I felt like sometimes that I was not really using myself as much as I wanted to. And when I got into professional training, it was like, oh, they were like, no, 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 we want you. You're the base of this character. And then you put the character on you. And that really felt right. And it felt like that had been my instinct all along. But I got, I got a little bit off track there for a while.
Wow, that was heavy. So, a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick said the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play? Let's say if do you write plays?
Yes, I'm a writer and a
Okay.
director and an actor.
Okay, so let's say when you're writing a play, what role does intention play in the writing process, in that creative process?
Um, it's funny because when you use the word intention, the first thing I think of is just acting, because that's what acting is all about, is action, is intent. What am I doing? Not necessarily what I'm saying, what am I doing? But in the playwright, it's important. I mean, the playwright's all about the words, but what's underneath the words. I mean, there's the goal of each scene, and then there's the goal of the whole play. There's the smaller intentions and then the big intention. What do I want to say? I mean, I have a new play that is in development right now, and it's a conflict essentially between a father and a daughter in the big thing. But what am I trying to say? What's my intention? You know what I mean? I'm trying to. It's a play about forgiveness under really difficult circumstances. So my intent is to have the audience come into that, because I'm showing them some people that are really at times very, very unpleasant. And how can I keep them on board to get to that moment, which is my intent, is to have them experience or to accept the fact that this one character is going to forgive her father, for a lifelong of horrible treatment.
That's heavy. Mark Twain said, "Forgiveness is the scent of the flower when the foot steps on it." But, now I got 2 questions. I'm gonna ask them a little out of order, but let's do it. Marcel Duchamp said, "There is no art without an audience." How much are you thinking of your audience when you're writing your play?
Not at all. Usually I'm thinking about my characters, I'm thinking about the story, I'm thinking about what it is I want to say. Um, and you know, I would say, I mean, as a writer, I really, if I start writing for my audience, I'm never going to write the play that I want to write.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, this is interesting because you've touched on this. Ruth Draper said, "The
Mm,
key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power." That's beautifully said, but how do you do that?
yeah, no, it is beautifully said. And I just recently did. I teach acting at John Jay College here in the city, and they're doing their finals, which were scenes and monologues. And I told them, I says, I'm inviting some people to this, and they all freaked out. And I said, people, we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for the audience. I says, and they are going to bring something in this room that's going to throw you for a loop, and that's part of the process. If you want, taking an acting class, this is the last lesson you're getting. And so and it was interesting how actors will always rise to it. They were terrified, but they rose to it, and each scene was enhanced by the audience. I don't know what that is. I don't know. That's a very, like you said, how do you do that? I don't know. I don't know how you explain it, but it exists. And
That
that is theater.
that is amazing. Here I go to the guru, it's like the guy goes to the guru on the hill and he goes, what's the best question I can ask you? And he goes, the one you just asked me.
Right.
Like I go to you, I go, Richard, how do you do this? It's like, no, I don't know. But I'll put you in the situation where you will figure out what to do. I mean,
Yeah, I can create that circumstance, but I can't
yeah.
explain it at all.
Oh boy. So what do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Cave theater. We got we only know cave art because it existed, but there's could have been cave music, or there probably was cave music,
I'm sure.
cave dance, cave theater. What was the motive? Your hunch.
Right. Well, they say two people talking to each other, it's a conversation. A third person watching them, it's theater. You know?
That's interesting. Yeah.
You know.
But what do you think their motive was? I mean, you can articulate your motive to me, why you do theater to a
Yeah.
point. You can articulate why you're an acting teacher, but is it different than them doing theater then? That's the main hidden question. But I mean, what do you think their motive was?
I think that their motive was probably the same motive that I have. I mean, I think that for some reason we like to look at ourselves. We like to see ourselves and we like to try to learn about ourselves. And somehow the only way we can do it is by taking two of us and putting them up there on a plank and saying, talk to each other. I'm going to watch. I'm going to figure something out, you know? And it's like, I think we can't do it. It's like the forest for the trees. We can't do it when we're in the midst of it. We need to put it over there and look at it. And I think that's a basic human instinct. And I think we've been doing it since the caves.
It is really well put. But let's go back to that line you said, two people talking is what? In a third
It's a
watch
conversation. It's a conversation.
is a conversation. Yeah, that's good.
When a third person walks up and starts watching them or listening to them, then it's theater.
Yeah. Because here's a phenomenal thing I learned. So I've been studying, why do humans invent anything? Why do we invent theater? Why do we invent pencils? And how do they shape our behavior? Because generally we invent these things and then we just embrace them and we don't know really how they change us. We just embrace them, the deeper level. So I used to ask, what was the first human invention ever? And it goes back to your honesty talk early on. One person said lying was the first human invention. And I was shocked. Like lying, telling a lie.
Lie. Okay.
Telling a lie. But people say whatever, harnessing fire, or language, to tools to dig or whatever. But do you know this guy? You probably know him. The Theater of the Oppressed, Augusto Boal and Paulo.
Yes, I've heard of him. Yeah.
They say theater was the first human invention. And that's pretty cool to think
about. Well, I would go along with that because I do think that the basic setup of theater, I think is probably, I mean, well, scratching on the walls too, I mean, like visual art, music. I mean, I think they're all around. But yeah, I think that the nice thing about theater, if you're not, you're somebody who has got to have lights and sound, so you really don't need anything. You don't need an instrument. You don't need a rock to scrape with something. You just need to just start talking or doing. Now you don't even have to talk.
You don't even have to talk. You can just, it's like that Sam Beckett play, my favorite. It's a baby cries. No, there's like this play, it's 30 seconds long that Beckett wrote. It's like there's a pile of garbage on the stage. Then you hear a baby take a breath and then cry, and it's over with. And I always, these sophisticated people go, that's that we can go out to dinner.
I know. Yeah. So many of Beckett's plays involve garbage. I love it.
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's amazing. So this theater of oppress, they said they use the theater as a means of promoting social and political change. Can you talk about that when, you know, again, it's back to that intention, like, just that sort of like, how do you navigate? Like, it's sort of like goes to Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan writes these songs and helps change our consciousness. Then he goes, I didn't write them to as an anti-war. I didn't write Masters of War as an anti-war. I just wrote a song and everybody wants to blame him. You helped it. So, I mean, in that way, he just fudging, talk about intention in that realm, promoting social and political change.
Well, when I was like, I guess, I don't know, 18 or something, I was in college. I took a course where theater or reading plays, and I read a play called Waiting for Lefty by Clifford Odets, and it
Yeah.
blew my mind. I loved it because of all its issues. I come from a strong working class background. You know what I mean? I just identified with it so much. And then when I kind of come to find out that this was considered a great play, I was like, then suddenly I thought I knew something, but I have been the story, the background of the story about Odets with that. I don't know if you know the story, what happened on 14th Street when he wrote a play about a cab strike. That's all he was writing about, was just a cab strike. You know what I mean? And them striking for more money. And he told it through a series of vignettes showing people's lives and how the union and everything affected their lives. And when this was first performed at this big theater on 14th Street, at the end of the play, that all the workers were screaming, strike, strike, strike. The entire audience rose out of their chairs and started screaming, strike. They really became frightened that there was going to be, some kind of a riot, because he had struck something, and that was not his intention. His intention was to,
Yeah.
write something about the cab strike, but this was during the Depression. People were saying no more, I mean, and so it did, and I've always loved that story because just like you had told that one, that was not, or the Bob Dylan thing, that was not the
Yeah.
intention. But I think we really write from our hearts, it's going to have those universal echoes, and it's going
Yeah.
to reach the audience like that.
It's almost like if you don't intend, I'm gonna make the strikers rise with this play, you might hit on it.
Right, right.
And so then another group that did, I think, theater in New York, Julian Molina and
The
Judith
Living Theater.
Molina. Yeah, and Julian Beck. I would just like to hear you process their quote. We believe in the theater as a place of intense experience, half dream, half ritual, in which the spectator approaches something of a vision of self understanding, going past conscious to unconscious to the understanding of the nature of all things. Again, that's, sounds good, but just your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, it's very Stanislavski in a way that what she's talking about, because an actor, in order for an actor really to truly do their job, they need to bypass the conscious and go to the subconscious. What I think she's saying is that they want the audience to have that experience as well. And I think that's how if the artists are able to work, and get to the subconscious level in their creation, the actors, the director, the designers, everybody, that will happen. But it takes it takes a village, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
in order to do that, because we are such wily beings. We're like, we want out, we want to figure it out, we want, oh, I see that, I saw through that, and I think what she was trying to say is, it seems like, the Living Theater was all about immersive theater, and trying to, immerse the audience in the play along with the actors.
Immersive is a great word. That was really good because I'm curious what led you, because haven't you taught acting in prisons?
Hmm.
Or
Yes, I do.
yeah, you've taught.
For
Okay.
10 years, I ran a theater workshop, and I now run a theater company for formerly incarcerated actors. So,
Yeah.
and
So
I still teach in prison too. So,
you still teach in prison. So that's
yeah.
amazing. Like what drove you to pursue that? It's three parts because you can just go off and talk about that. What drove you to pursue that? How's it different than teaching actors who are kids who want to be actors to prison people to go past the conscious and go to the subconscious? Like I mean, this is a little different. They're in trapped in this. And then the big question is, does punishment work?
Yeah, I can answer that one right now. No.
Because it's like, does the criminal, yeah, and I'll lead it into this. Does the criminal you deal with, I hate to call them whatever they are, the criminal, people who are incarcerated,
The
that
guys, I call
yeah, the guys, do they think they did something morally wrong, or did they just say their criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day and they got caught?
Well,
Because
there's
I
a
have a
right.
million people. Yeah, so go ahead, sir.
There's a whole range. That's a whole thing. The thing is I mean, just to go back just briefly, I have worked for most of my career. When I've taught, I taught in the South Bronx, Harlem, places where at-risk kids, and then I had an opportunity to work for the Fortune Society with parolees and people at alternatives detention where kids were held, in these places rather than going to prison. And then I was doing a reading of a play of mine up at the Fortune Society, and somebody came up to me and said, "I run a little theater workshop at a prison upstate. Would you mind? Would you consider coming up here and teaching a master class?" And I thought, like, okay, I've been teaching like these wild kids, and these kids almost in trouble, and the kids, half in trouble. Let me see what's going on there. And I went up there, and I taught that class, and it was one of the most vibrant experiences I'd had in a long time. I mean, they were so hungry for the work, and they were so honest. And there was, it's ironic to say this, they had no bad habits for being convicted felons. Do you know what I mean? And I'm talking about acting habits. They had no bad acting habits, which the young actors that want to be actors have tons of them. And and then I thought it was a one-time experience. They called me a couple of months later, said the guys want you to come back again. So I went back again. I said, look, I can't. This is it. This is because it's a volunteer position. I can't do this. I got life. I got a career. Blah, blah, blah. Well, 10 years later and 5 productions later, do you know what I mean? I was still doing it. I mean, what shut it down was the pandemic. That's when I could go into.
Wait a minute. You mean you were volunteer for 10 years? No,
I
they
was
don't even get gas money.
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I was total volunteer for 7 years, and then I got a little bit of money from an outside source, and for the last couple of years. But for the first 7 years, it was completely volunteer because I didn't, Anyway, so that's that. And then while I was there, I learned that John Jay College had a program there that where they had classes, and then I ended up applying to that, and I got on that, and so then now I get paid to teach theater and intro to theater and acting and stuff like that. But then I formed this production company on the outside with the guys that got out of prison and wanted to keep doing theater. And we're doing a show this summer down our first live production in 2.5 years. So
It's pretty amazing. It reminds me of a line we used to use we work with a lot of people like that on the streets in Venice, and we go, "How much are we not paying you? Double that."
right.
But where did you get this, Richard? You have a sense of, doing that for 7 years because you're getting something out of it for yourself. You're connecting with these people. Did you get that more from the way your parents raised you or on your own?
I think my parents did have some influence on my attitude toward money, although everybody else in my family did not get the same thing. Money has, it's funny, my accountant a couple years ago said, somebody asked something about me, and they said, another friend who's the accountant, they said, well, Richard this, Richard that. And he says, you know what, Richard, he's not interested in money. And I said, that's perfect. That's exactly right. Somebody finally put it into words. No, I know I need it. Of course, I live in an apartment. I do things, but like, it's just not interesting to me. And it's not the first question I ask when an opportunity comes up that I find fascinating or interesting. The last thing I ask is, oh, does it pay?
Yeah.
So
Cool. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
conviction in what's, and we're just talking about a lot of prison here, so that word conviction is a little loaded.
It is. Yeah, it's,
Conviction of your beliefs or something, of
the
your conscience.
conviction of your beliefs, like, yeah, that kind of
I
conviction.
think
Yeah.
compromise is more important. I think compromise is moving toward peace, and I think that's someplace I want to move toward always.
Yeah. Again, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. So, you've accomplished a lot in your life. Rate these three elements in your accomplishments: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Luck, skill, and ambition. I think skill. Um, I've I would put that as that's what I always have tried to strengthen the most. That's what I rely on when everything falls apart. That, I mean, like I said recently, somebody got plagiarized on something, and I said, well, if they ever plagiarize one of my plays, I'll just write another one. And I'm so happy that I've got the ability to create, and that's my skill.
What would you put second and third then? Luck or ambition?
I would put luck second, I guess, because ambition is like, you know, although, once I sign my name on something and some woman in this acting class, she says, and you say you're not ambitious, because I have this so I don't know.
Right.
It's hard because to me, there's the right kind of ambition or the wrong kind of ambition, and maybe it's all the wrong kind of ambition. I don't know. But, everything that I read, all the Alan Watts and the Anthony DeMellos and, Eckhart Tolle's and all these people, they're all talking about, that ambition can really take us down if,
Yeah.
if it's an end in itself.
Yeah. Funny you said that, because first of all, people don't like to say skill first. To me, you're an icon of humility. You're a humble guy, as what I've known from you for talking to you an hour. But you literally said skill first, and I appreciate that people can recognize that. I used to say, is ambition based more on fear or joy? So I changed the question because I read William Friedkin, the guy who directed The Exorcist. He says,
Yeah.
in Hollywood, it has nothing to do with skill or luck. It's all ambition. So, whether he's right or wrong, I just love that idea. And it's not that ambition is bad or skill is good or bad or luck, but I love that. So T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Oy vey. That's my
That
answer.
that is a great that is a great answer without even knowing it. Yeah, that's my wife said she was in New York for 17 years. She goes, I'm Jewish by osmosis.
Yes,
That's you.
exactly.
That's what you yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
you're
my whole life, you know
vanilla,
what I mean?
yeah, vanilla,
People,
chocolate, and strawberry.
Robert, I had one of these guys, from one of these Rebbe places come up to me on the street. He says, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" I said, "Practically."
So two of my film heroes say, one says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas, right there in New York, said there is no self-expression. And another New Yorker, Cecil Taylor, great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So again, it's a stupid question. It's just your inclination of how you process it. I know it's both. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, and environments are dominant?
Well, I feel that my best work is when I'm channeling something that's coming through me from somewhere. That I can generate things from me too, but I find that work is not nearly as meaningful as the work when I'm able to open. I mean, there are sometimes I look at things that I've written and I don't remember writing it, and I know that it's successful in a way because it's
Yeah.
really it seems inevitable. I always say to my actors, they're always like, Rich, I think I got it inevitable. Like I use that word like that the acting of the character should be inevitable. We should just completely buy that you are that, that person or something. And they use it in a way of like as a goal now. It's like, Rich, I'm almost too inevitable.
That's a great word, because the other word I struggle with trying to understand, and I like it, is vulnerable. What is that close to inevitable?
Well, inevitable, I think, is kind of like beyond belief. It's like believable, but has always been believable. That the character existed before they walked on the stage, kind of thing. But vulnerable, that's just a quality of a character, and it is certainly. I the other day I was looking for an actor, and I said to a colleague, I said, I need somebody who can just raise holy hell, but also expose their vulnerability.
Yeah.
And she goes, I got just the guy for you,
Yeah.
and she delivered him, and he was terrific. But yeah, vulnerable that's the thing that's the hardest. And you were asking before, when I was working in the prison, it is sometimes I find it amazing in the environment when I'm working in the prison and we're doing an acting class. We do a thing called uh, life stories or bio bits, where they get up there and they just talk and they tell something. They just tell about, I say, tell me about your life in 5 minutes, and like, and oftentimes they will break down, they will weep, they will really, and they will really access. And it's because I believe, they're in this horrific environment, but then within the environment, this space, this safe space has been created where they can then show literally. And if I were to say be vulnerable, forget it, it would never happen. But you create the space,
Wow.
and suddenly they're weeping, and it's stunning, and it's very moving, and it's, I hate to say it, but it is therapeutic, even though that's not my job. I'm not a therapist, I'm an acting
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah, I hang out with a lot of homeless people and talk to them, and you can break down when we're right there on the boardwalk, and you know, it's amazing how you can get into these real discussions.
Yeah, right.
So the hidden question to that last one was, can art making be egoless?
I don't think so. I think that the ego, ego gets a bad rap because it's always, it's evil and it's terrible. But I think that it's also necessary, or it wouldn't exist. I think it's what we do with it. Yeah, I think a certain amount of ego is necessary to create art, to have the courage to say, okay, I'm gonna say this, But I think that what you brought up before about it coming through you rather than from you, if you can try to maintain that, that keeps the ego in check. The ego is just kind of like at the doorway, letting it come through and saying, okay, you know what I mean? But I think once we start to think that I am the be all end all and it's all coming from me, then we get in trouble and the art suffers too.
What does courage mean to you now?
Courage to me means being terrified of doing something and doing it anyway.
That's pretty good. Terrified of doing something.
Something that
Really
you
good.
have to do, whether
Yeah.
it's a confrontation or it's a, whatever it is. I recently I faced one of my greatest fears. I went down in the subway. This was before the pandemic. I would see these buskers in the subway, and I play guitar and I sing, and it's not like main part of my career. It's what I do. I enjoy it, and I do it for friends and stuff like that. I'm not like out there musician. And I always wanted to go down the subway and sing. And it terrified me, the idea of going down there and putting my little stool and putting my guitar, and I just, for years I talked about it. And one day, I don't know what it was, I just grabbed my case and I put the thing in it, and I went down there and I played for like an hour and a half. And one of the guys that worked in the subway, one of the men, I dropped my capo on the tracks, and he came over and he got one of these long 60s. He says, I'll get that for you. He says, I like your music. And I
No.
felt like I die that day, and that would be, and I was playing all this old stuff. I was playing, stuff from Hair, because I had just done a production of Hair. I was doing like all these kind of like stuff from the 60s and 70s, and he just went crazy. So it was fun.
Well, if you're out here in Venice, let's go down to the boardwalk, because I used to have a group I've studied the street musicians for 40 years on the boardwalk, and I used to have this group, and all we played was "Earache My Eye" by Cheech and Chong and "Smoke on the Water" as a it was like comedy rock, and people would look at us, and it said on our box, "Do not put money in here." And one day, someone threw a potato at us from a high rise, and I was like really hurt. I didn't mind people laughing or saying
Yeah,
you're
but
horrible.
throwing things, right?
So this is really fun. Is perception reality?
No, I would say.
That's fine. Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I believe in like extraterrestrial people. I'm hoping that before I die, they come see us. I hope they knock some sense into our head. I hope we don't shoot them out of the sky. You know what I mean? Um, and I
That's
guess,
good.
I mean, that's one thing that I really, I mean, I'm a big science fiction fan. Not all science fiction, but good science fiction, and I find it prescient. I find certain writers really prescient, and I even see today how things that they wrote back then have really come to pass before they could possibly know that it would happen. So,
Who's a couple of your sci-fi people you like, writers?
well, Asimov, of course, and I just read Fahrenheit 451, which is interesting. It's not that it's science fiction as much as sort of end of world kind of stuff. But Gene Roddenberry, I mean, the whole Star Trek thing, I'm a huge
Yeah,
fan, uh, and I think that the franchise keeps going, and some things are more successful than others, but they're really about something.
yeah.
And that is what's really I find compelling. And my students, they laugh at me. They think I'm some kind of old nerd or something. But I keep saying, guys, watch some of this stuff. If you want to see good writing and if you want to see issues that mean something to you, watch this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's amazing. Because have you ever read More Than Human by Theodore Sturgeon?
no, no.
'Cause,
But
I'm
I'll
always
write it
amazed.
down.
It was, Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead and Frank Zappa's favorite book, but a lot of those books had big impact on us, like Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh yeah, I read
And
that.
yeah, and Ray Bradbury, he wrote that right down the street right here in Venice, California.
Yep.
So, tell me one major element. You've pursued theater for so many years, Richard. Tell me one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed.
In theater.
No,
In
in your creativeness being in theater,
Oh, okay, okay. One thing that stayed the same and one thing that's changed. Um, One thing that stayed the same is my intent, I guess, to render the work as honest and open as possible. I mean, I'm relentless in the pursuit of that. As soon as there's any kind of nonsense or bullshit, what I mean, there was a young woman I was working with in my acting class, and her eyes were up in the ceiling, and she was all over the place, and I was like, to me, like, it's like, stop acting. And then she got really upset. She goes, I thought this was an acting class. I said, well, yeah, well, there's words can be misleading. I mean, and, we went on this whole thing, but like at the end of the semester, she came up to me. I mean, because I really got her down from that place. It took many months, you know what I mean, to get her to be really honest and to be herself. And it was quite beautiful to watch. And I mean, she was guarded. It wasn't all like peaches and cream, but she says, thank you. I resisted at first. I says, yes, I noticed that. She goes, but
Yeah,
I'm glad I finally sort of understood what you were at. And I said,
yeah,
okay, good, good, good. So hopefully, I mean, like that's something that I just, it's an instinct in me. The thing that's probably changed is my perception of in I guess a lot of it's like in casting or in making choices that to not see things the way I see them, like first to be open to other options, and that has really opened me up in a way that has included so many more people. And, I got out of my little world that I grew up in this little working class town in New Jersey. And suddenly I feel like I live in the world and I bring the world into my work. And it's because I unlocked that door.
Really well put. Thank you, Richard. And Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
A weakness I turned into a strength. Um, I have always been, since I was a kid, I have always been a crier. My kindergarten teacher sent a note home to my mother that said, "Richard is a very bright boy, but he cries at the drop of a hat." And that was like, and I said, some things never change. And but I think that, and for a while in period of my life, I started to push that down and started to try to man up, or for lack of a better expression, that's a very bad expression, but human up, let's say. But I've decided, and as I went on, to just allow that to be, and that's part of who I am. Not everybody is like that, but that is my strength in terms of especially dealing with other people who feel things a little more than others. That I'm able to say it's okay. I mean, if a student does a beautiful scene in the class, and I start crying, they're like, "Professor, are you all right?" I go, "I'm more than all right." I said, I'm absolutely thrilled. This is so beautiful. I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm crying because I'm filled with joy and pride.
Yeah.
So I think that what I always thought was a weakness is actually a strength, that I'm able to show how I feel without, putting a clamp on it.
Sheesh, I can relate 100%. My mom taught me that. That's why I gravitated towards that James Joyce word, laugh tears. He turned laughter into laugh tears, and that it's a combination. But she taught us to cry, be not a because you got to get these emotions out of your system. But being a nurse, also, she said, because you're getting toxins out of your body. You don't realize that tears have this stuff, and it's
Right.
like it is a healthy thing to cry. It's amazing how we're raised. So anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
When it's not aimed at another human being,
Yeah.
you know, when you're doing work or you're expressing yourself in a way that you know what I mean, is trying to help, but you're not aiming it at someone, then I think anger is valuable.
There's a saying that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate.
Mm.
James Joyce said, it's curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So how would you react to this idea? I'm not saying you, but you create what you resist. One creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that idea?
I mean, that's a concept that I deal with in a lot of my reading, too. That that we when we become hard, when we let something hit us as opposed to pass through us, this whole other thing sort of occurs. Do you know what I mean? Um, and well, as the Borg say in Star Trek, resistance is futile. Uh,
Yeah.
because I just think listening is so important, and considering, and then if you don't agree, I mean, it's hard because things are so volatile now. Things are so crazy, and I think it's because we've gotten beyond that, and I have to be careful that in uh, my unhappiness about a lot of the situations that I'm seeing and feeling in the world, that I don't become as angry and as hurtful as the people who are doing those things. That my response doesn't mirror what they're doing, because then we're really in a big
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
God says line, having a real hard time loving George Bush. It's like fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving Putin or whatever. I mean, what
Right.
does hating do? I mean, but I'm glad you read Alan Watts, because I love to ask these. These are 5 quickie questions that Alan Watts would ask. So just off the top of your head in a few words, who started it all?
We did.
Are we going to make it?
I don't know.
Where do we put it?
Deep, 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 deep down.
Who's cleaning it up?
We are.
Is it serious?
Very.
Wow, you really ripped through man, most people stumble all over those. That was great. Okay, so we just got about 10 more minutes here, Richard. It's been totally delightful and enlightening. Can you forget to die?
It would be that's one of the things I'm working on. Well, but there's the other concept is can you die before you die? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Can you die to all the stuff that is, like that, so when we say die, if we mean physical death, you know what I mean? That's one thing, but to die to the angst and the fear and all that stuff, like they say the greatest goal is to die before you die because then death is no big deal.
Die before you die. I've never heard that, but it was really well put. On what occasion do you lie?
When I feel that I may hurt somebody very much.
Yeah. You are a pretty dang honest person, because you know how many times I've asked that question for about it's a Marcel Proust question. And they ask it at the end of Vanity Fair every issue. And in like 40 years of asking it, one person until 2 days ago says, "I don't lie." And what they mean is I don't try to lie, but everybody lies, but
Lies, yeah, of
but
course.
they don't wanna say it, and I appreciate they saying it. But, one of my favorites is, Tom Waits. He says, "On what occasion do you lie?" He says, "I didn't know I needed an occasion."
I love him.
How do you find peace of mind?
I I don't know if this is healthy or whatever, but I do find peace of mind in my work. Sometimes that concerns me because I wish that I could find it outside of my work. But I guess the other place I find peace of mind is in animals. I
Yeah.
I find if I'm really, really stressed out, you know what I mean, I just pick up one of the cats and just sit him on my lap and he starts purring and I'm
Yeah.
really at peace.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's funny because, when I talk to students, sometimes I say, get your job and your life as mixed up as possible.
Mhm.
So that then you're living your life, you find peace of mind because, there's that cliche, don't take your job home with you. But, like artists, we're like, you can't
Freelance, that's
separate.
the definition of take your work home with you.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Okay, I mean, I would in light of it, I would say hello, but you know, you know what I mean? Like, then there's all this thing around it. Like, is this a setup arrangement or is this just a
Right,
casual?
right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm
You
being very careful here. You know,
you're a theater person, you're like, "What's the setup?"
right?
That's
Like,
good.
if you set up a meeting with me and my 12-year self, yeah, then I might have some questions or I might have some things to say. But like, I'm just running into him on the street. Hey, how you doing? Keep going.
That's
You know.
it, good. No, I appreciate that. Um, this filmmaker, she goes, "What do you mean? Do I have any regrets?" I goes, "No, what would you say?" She said, "Quit drinking all that peppermint schnapps."
One thing I would say, okay, I'll just, I would say it gets better.
Yeah, yeah. Which which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over.
Why?
I don't know. I've always done it that way. So that's one of those old ideas that I told you I'm nervous about,
Yeah.
right?
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Yes.
And they wanna scent the glue and the binding, what smell would it be?
Cut grass.
Oh, I like that. And, tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Um, to win the lottery.
It's good. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Laugh.
Oh my god. What's the function of laughter?
Complete release and
That's
joy. Yeah, complete. Yeah, just release. Yeah, that's it.
yeah. That's, Gurdjieff said the function of laughter is to, uh, the reconciliation of yes and no. It's
Yeah,
pretty amazing that we
yeah.
but, what do you've probably tackled satire in your playwriting, and it's an important part of plays. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
Well, I mean, I think Swift had something going there, but I would include one's own face in there.
Yeah,
You had the courage to do it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
I mean, I think it's to also recognize the absurd. I mean, I find the absurd to be wonderful. I had a sister that I was very close with, and she was the only person in the family that got it, that got being absurd. You know what I mean? Like, was just fun, and it was such a release. And I think that's what satire does a lot of times is expose the absurdity of many situations that we take too seriously.
I like that. 3 born, we're out of here. Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I would say, well, I mean, I don't know if I see it in the world, but I see it in my students and the young people that I work with, that there seems to be a hunger to go back to basics. And I think that that's really the answer. And I think these kids, their instincts are telling them something, and it encourages me.
I like that. Thornton Wilder, pretty good theater guy. Art, he said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm grateful. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this, but what's it really all about for you?
For me, it's about love.
Yeah. It's funny because that's the answer I get with the first question the most is what's the best thing for a human being? People say love. But to own yourself was really interesting. I like to uh, you know, think about that. Embrace all that you are. So last question again, Richard, thank you so much. It's truly been enlightening and fun. What gives you the most optimism?
Someone, what gives me those is I just want to. There's this one expression about the three most important things in life is to include the excluded, um, and I can't remember the second one, but to admit that you're wrong. When I see people admit that they're wrong, when I admit that I'm wrong, and I'm able to live through that, it gives me such hope, because to me that is where it's all. If I'm willing to change, there's hope for the world, because it's got to start with me. I can't say, "Oh, the world sucks," and it's got to change. No, I've got to change. If there's
Yeah.
a problem in the world, part of that problem is in me, and so I've got to do something about it. And that gives me hope that I have the ability, it would seem, with a lot of work, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
to take those, those first steps towards changing.
Yeah. But this is interesting. I'm going to pursue that. So you're saying one of them is include the excluded, one of them is admit you are wrong, and then the third one we'll have to figure it out. But who do you remember where you got it? These
Well,
three?
I could probably find it for you right now, but wisdom. If I can find it, it's there's a lot of there's a lot of contention as to who said it. So I'm not sure.
Well, you know what's like, there's a great website called Quote Investigator. Have you ever used it?
Right.
And they
No.
try to resource where you get these. But anyways, it's a great thing. And it's sort of fun that one's missing because it'll make me pursue to learn the third one.
Okay. Yeah. Unless I can't find it right now.
No,
But
you can email it to me
I
someday.
have all
But
these Alan
Richard,
Watts quotes here. Right.
this has really been fun and enlightening. But lastly, who connected us? Do you remember?
Flash Rosenberg.
Oh my God. We gotta put great kudos out to Flash. Thank you for connecting us.
Yeah. So I'm still, once I get on something, and I'll remember it as soon as we hang up. Anyway, I don't have it.
Well,
Okay.
listen, this is we'll have another salon someday online, or we'll meet in person. But Richard, thank you so much. I'm going to hit the end button, but I don't want this to ever end. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Really.
Thank you. Okay. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks.